It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. I'm Geoff Arbuckle, and this is Monster Mondays, presented to you by Film Seizure. In for one Mechagodzilla movie, in for two, am I right? This week, let's talk about Terror of Mechagodzilla. This is a direct sequel to the previous entry in the Godzilla franchise. This would also bring about the close of the Showa era of Godzilla films as well, after a fairly disappointing box office take. But it's not without a great deal of noteworthy information about the film and the production itself. Again, like I had mentioned last week, Godzilla wasn't exactly the box office juggernaut that he was some 10 years prior. A series of overly kiddie and progressively silly entries ultimately proved to be a mortal wound for the franchise. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla in 1974 would kind of try to reverse the course, but it was really only marginally more successful than the most recent release before that, Godzilla vs. Megalon. Determined to continue on with the series, Ishiro Honda was brought in and returned to direct this film after being absent from the character's movies since 1969. It's likely that there was some hope to reinvigorate the series with Big G's creator, but that's not the most interesting thing about the development of the movie. For that, let's talk about what Toho did. They ran a story contest for the next installment. Yukiko Takayama won, becoming the first female writer to get credit on a Godzilla film. Honda himself stated that he would have loved to have worked with Takayama a little bit more because he really loved working on a story that had a feminine perspective. Most of what Takayama's original script submission does remain in the finished project. However, a couple of things were cut for budget reasons. One of those things cut was a climax that found Tokyo completely destroyed. Instead, the final fight happens in a countryside, and that's how the movie is kind of concluded. Another idea that was cut was the idea of two dinosaur creatures called the Titans. This would be condensed down to a single dinosaur-like kaiju called Titanosaurus. One of the drafts would have seen these two titans merge into Titanosaurus, but it really wasn't all that well explained. Nor was it a really major plot point either, despite the biological miracle of two individual creatures combining to form one. Regardless, Titanosaurus is still there, but his origins aren't well explained, and he's just kind of always been living in the seas around Japan. One other item of note in this film is that this is one of the very rare occasions in which there is nudity in the movie. A control device for Mechagodzilla is surgically inserted into a character. Now, the nudity here was really kind of more implied on the operating table, as it was a mannequin that was used for the scene, but it was still removed from the US versions of the film by censors. As for Yukiko Takayama, she did end up having a halfway decent career. Between 1975 and 2011, she had 11 credits to her name and even directed a couple of her scripts too. Now, as I mentioned, this is such a direct sequel that it picks up directly from the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla conclusion. So much so, it gives you the highlights of the previous movie, showing the big fight at the end and so forth, and Godzilla ripping off the head of Mecha G, the whole 9 yards during the credits. And as the movie begins, we find that Interpol is still involved in searching for any piece of Mechagodzilla that they can. I assume they're doing this to ultimately turn it into a terrible, terrible weapon of mass destruction because, let's face it, that's what us people are pretty good at. As the little submarine is floating around, they are soon attacked by an aquatic creature that almost sounds like it gobbles like a really, really angry turkey. Anyway, this is Titanosaurus, and it turns out that there is this mad scientist named Professor Mifune, and some aliens who hate the human race see a kindred spirit in Mifune. And Mifune became obsessed with controlling life. And Interpol and a marine biologist named Akira start looking to see if Mifune is somehow involved with Titanosaurus, and thus the wreck it caused at the start of the movie. Now, Mifune's daughter, Katsura, tells the men that her father is dead. However, they hope to find some of his notes on the dinosaurs that he studied. She lied, though, because Mifune is still alive, definitely, and meeting with the evil aliens. Mifune is recruited by the aliens from the third planet of the black hole as they rebuild Mechagodzilla into a more powerful version. They want him to help with the sonar range to kind of control Mechagodzilla from further out. And, maybe while he's at it, maybe ask Titanosaurus to help out with these aliens too? Meanwhile, Akira learns more about how Titanosaurus was a gentle creature who didn't really ever was known for attacking things. So things are a little strange about how it sunk that Interpol submarine. Akira plans to go looking for the dinosaur, but Katsura basically begs him not to go. She's starting to develop feelings for Akira, much as he is starting to develop feelings for her. Now, here's where things get a little trippy, even for a Godzilla film. Mifune doesn't mind if Katsura goes with Akira to find Titanosaurus. At first, he didn't want her to do anything with humans, but he relents after a while, and the aliens, well, they know something about Katsura. She's actually a cyborg. Yeah, she was nearly killed during one of her father's experiments when she was a teenager. To save her life, he had to put robot bits into her. So she's kind of got this weird mixed up set of emotions in her. She wants to be a normal girl, but being a cyborg allows her father and the aliens to kind of twist her into being this vengeful person as well. So she's got some actual inner conflict here. The aliens try to use Katsura to attack Akira in the sub with Titanosaurus, but they use supersonic waves to hurt the monster, allowing them to fight off his attack. Mifune doesn't really think that the supersonic waves will ultimately amount to much, so he tells Katsura to go ahead and unleash Titanosaurus onto Japan's mainland. He makes landfall and seemingly will run right into another supersonic defense by the good guys, right? Well, no. The aliens have sent someone to sabotage their machine, Katsura. So the aliens, though, aren't exactly happy about Titanosaurus being sent without their knowledge of it at first, but they make lemonade out of the situation. They let Godzilla and Titanosaurus fight each other. Godzilla will kill Titanosaurus, and Godzilla then will be too tired or injured to face against the new and improved Mechagodzilla. Perfect, right? Well, Godzilla and Titanosaurus battle in Yokosuka, and Godzilla wins actually pretty easily and forces the Titanosaurus to retreat. Now, the aliens scold Mifune for sending Titanosaurus out. After doing so, they reveal that Katsura will be the person controlling Mechagodzilla. You see, they did some surgery on Katsura's cyborg body and placed her not only under the lead alien's direct control, but also placed the Mechagodzilla control device inside her body. Now, Akira gets captured by the aliens, and he sees that Masura can now control both Mecha-G and Titanosaurus. The alien leader has her send both monsters into Japan so they can wreck that place up. Godzilla arrives and does everything he can to fight the two monsters, but it eventually catches up to him. Titanosaurus actually starts wailing on Godzilla's head at one point. At another point, he bites Godzilla on the mouth and lifts him up off the ground. At another point, Mechagodzilla shoots up Big G with missiles, and he's down on the ground. So Titanosaurus then starts kicking him into a ditch to get him buried by more missiles from Mechagodzilla. And then Titanosaurus kind of starts jumping on the mound, kind of like a trampoline to kind of pack him in and bury him. It's crazy. But Titanosaurus is eventually distracted by the sound weapon that Interpol has created. So Godzilla and Mecha-G get that rematch. Godzilla does try to tear the head off again, but this time the aliens were ready for that move, as it turns out that removing the head doesn't really need to be there and needs to be a problem in order for Mechagodzilla to carry on with attacks. Meanwhile, Interpol breaks into the aliens' hideout and pretty much kill everyone in order to save Akira. Katsura even kills herself to shut off the control signal to Mechagodzilla, and free Titanosaurus. That turns out to be kind of a depressing scene. But I guess that means that Godzilla can continue a streak of wins, so I guess that's uplifting. I'm not entirely sure why Titanosaurus is still so upset now that Katsura can no longer control him, but whatever. He goes back into the sea after Godzilla blasts him with some atomic breath. Godzilla also blows up alien ships trying to escape too, because he was not messing around this time. So let's get to my 3 things I like about Terror of Mechagodzilla. First up, I really like the Katsura character. Godzilla and Gamera both employed a lot of strange sci-fi ideas throughout their individual series. This usually means that sometimes individual characters would be placed right in the center of the evil plan of the bad guys. They'd be manipulated or something into doing what the bad guys want. In the Godzilla series, that tended to be more on the monsters than people, but still, there was usually some sort of outside influence. Here we have a cyborg lady with a complicated relationship with her father, and with these aliens, and with people as a whole. That adds a little melodrama to the movie that I think probably comes from a feminine perspective in the script. There are a couple of instances in which Katsura or Akira are thinking about something the other person said, and it is shot in a very soap opera style with the other characters speaking to them in an inset circle next to the person's head. It does make for some additional drama. Also, it is the girl who is controlling the monster, not the mad scientist. He just gave her the means in order to do so. Second, there's a very brief moment that reveals something a little dark about this movie. It's something I never really noticed before, but now that I did notice it, it hasn't really left me. So the aliens are from the third planet of the black hole, and they are rebuilding Mechagodzilla for another go at Big G himself, as well as another attempt for the aliens to take over the world, right? And no, the aliens do not reveal their ape faces this time around. That's completely cut out of the budget. Anyway, their workforce are kidnapped humans. They are basically a slave labor. Now, early on, when the Mifunes are listening to the proposals of the aliens, and one of the workers ends up escaping, we find out later what became of that person. He ran into somebody just working alongside the road and gives the guy a piece of space titanium to give to Interpol. However, he doesn't verbally tell the guy that. He wrote the word Interpol on his hand. The guy who takes the piece of space titanium to the agency said that the guy had a jagged scar on his throat. So he was obviously rendered mute. Now, did the aliens not just create a slave workforce of humans, but cut out their larynxes to prevent them from speaking to anyone? If so, that's some pretty dark shit. The aliens were kind of a problem in the previous movie because they could easily operate among people thanks to their people disguises. This time, though, they're mutilating people so they either can't easily tell their stories to an outsider, or they won't be bogged down with the yakety yak during the workday. Another thing mentioned briefly that is also pretty dark for a mostly younger audience is seeing that likely are seeing this movie. Akira asks the aliens who they are, and the leader of the aliens responds that they are the second coming. They've come here to save the earth from the people who live on it. Now back that up for just a second, though. He specifically calls what they are doing the second coming. All of a sudden, this shit just got biblical. Now, thirdly, there are two things they do that I think that are done very well in this movie, that is in how they introduce Godzilla into the fights. Now, first, when Titanosaurus is making his first foray onto land, it's nighttime. Godzilla appears in silhouette the first time, and we see him through and then it actually has this awesome shot that we see him through like smoke and explosions and stuff like that. Because Titanosaurus is just rampaging through, and Godzilla emerges from the darkness to save the day. The second time he's introduced into a fight is when Titanosaurus and Mechagodzilla are really starting to lay waste to Tokyo. It looks like Titanosaurus is about to step on a couple of kids, but Godzilla pops up out of nowhere and starts tussling with the dinosaur. Then you think Godzilla is down for the count and buried later in the movie, and he gets help from Interpol using the supersonics on Titanosaurus, and bam! Godzilla pops up out of the ground and starts blasting away on Mecha G. For a long time, I really thought that this to be kind of a lesser entry of the series, but rewatching it, I actually really like it quite a bit. It's kind of a downer ending considering we wouldn't see Big G again for nearly 10 years, and we wouldn't see him as an actual hero for decades beyond that. But there were attempts over the years between this and Godzilla 1984 that Toho tried, but just couldn't get anything off the ground until the mid-80s. The 15 films that make up the Showa era are really special achievements. They were efficient. They were entertaining. They have never lost their appeal to me, even the sillier ones, even the really bad one like Godzilla's Revenge. But you know what's great about them too? I still have a whole bunch of them that I can cover on this show in the future. So that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. Don't forget to check out new episodes of Film Seizure every Wednesday and a new installment of Monster Mondays each Monday on filmseizure.com, as well as places where fine podcasts are found like SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. Additionally, hop on over to Facebook and Twitter to follow us by just searching for Film Seizure. You can also check out new posts at my website, bmovieanima.com, each and every Friday. So, until next week, stay spooky.